It's 6:40 in the morning. You're standing in the driveway with lukewarm coffee, looking at a 14-year-old Toyota Corolla, the color of wet sand. There's a crack in the bumper. A shopping cart hit it 2 winters ago. You never fixed it. Not because you couldn't, but because a cracked bumper doesn't change anything about the car. It still starts, it still gets you to the office in 11 minutes. The interior smells faintly of coffee you've spilled on the passenger seat over the years, and the driver's seat fabric has worn thin in the exact shape of a person who sat there every weekday morning for a very long time. Your neighbor Derek backs out at the same time. Tesla Model X, $1,190 a month. He told you that number the week he got it, unprompted, the way people tell you numbers they want you to react to. He waves. You wave back. He has no idea your investment accounts hold $3.1 million. He has no idea because nothing about the driveway or the modest 3-bedroom house you've lived in for 19 years would suggest it. And you've never corrected him. Correcting him was never the point. Nobody on this street knows. Not Derek, not the mail carrier, not the guy 2 houses down who asks every spring if you're finally going to trade in the Corolla. Here's what he doesn't know, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how it happened. Stay with this one, because the number at the end is going to make you check your own. At 34, you were making $91,000 a year. Not a huge income, a normal one, close to what a lot of people watching this make right now, which is exactly why this works the same way for you as it did for me. You had a Lexus, financed for 6 years, $460 a month. You had a savings rate of 6%, which sounds fine until you do the math. 6% of $91,000 is $5,460 a year. At that pace, you're not retiring comfortably. You're retiring in your late 70s, maybe. So you sold the Lexus, took a loss on it. That's what happens when you finance a depreciating asset for 6 years and then wake up in year 3 wanting out. You bought the Corolla for $11,400 cash. No loan, no payment, no interest working against you every month while the car itself became worth less. The $460 you used to send to the Lexus dealership, you didn't spend it. You automated it into a brokerage account on the 2nd of every month before it had the chance to become a nicer dinner, or a coat you didn't need, or the kind of small purchase that doesn't feel like a decision until you add up a year of them. Rule number 1. A car payment is a subscription to depreciation. You're not paying for transportation. You're paying, monthly, to watch something lose value faster than you can enjoy it. Derek's Tesla Model X will be worth about $34,000 in 5 years. Total cost to own it over that time, payments, insurance, tires that cost 4 times what yours do, roughly $71,000. That same $71,000 invested at 8% becomes $104,000 over the same 5 years. Same street, same 5 years, 2 completely different outcomes, running quietly in the background of every driveway here. Invisible to anyone watching. That's a $130,000 swing from one decision made once at 34. Keep that number in your head. It's about to get bigger. Keeping that $460 moving for 19 years wasn't always easy. There were early years, a kitchen renovation, a friend's destination wedding, when the automated transfer felt like a small, dumb cruelty you were inflicting on yourself for no visible reward. You did it anyway. Discipline is the wrong word for what sustained it. Discipline implies a fight you're having with yourself every month. This was closer to a preference you'd stopped relitigating. The same way you don't debate brushing your teeth every night. The decision had already been made. You were just executing it. Year 3, it almost broke. Your company went through layoffs. Missed you, but rattled you enough that you sat at the kitchen table with the automation settings open, cursor hovering, seriously considering pausing the contribution for 6 months to pad your checking account instead. You didn't pause it. Instead, you built a smaller cash cushion beside it, funded by cutting a gym membership you barely used and a streaming bundle you'd stopped watching. Small adjustments, almost embarrassingly small looking back. But that was the year the habit stopped being fragile And it's the same trick that works no matter what your income actually is. Find the fixed cost that isn't doing anything for you and redirect it before you talk yourself out of it. 19 years of $460 a month at 8% is $308,000 from contributions alone. But you didn't stop at $460. Every raise, half to lifestyle, half to the account. A rule you set at 34 and never revised. Every bonus, 70% in, 30% spent, because 100 felt unsustainable, and 50 felt like leaving money on the table you'd regret in a decade. By your late 40s, you were investing $2,100 a month without your lifestyle changing much at all. The account crossed $1 million at 48, $2 million at 53, $3.1 million this morning. Same Corolla, same cracked bumper, still starting every day without asking anything of you. If you're doing the mental math on your own numbers right now, good. That's exactly where this starts. Keep going, because the next part is the one most people get wrong. There was a specific year, though, that tested all of it more than any other. And it wasn't the layoffs. It was the year you turned 41, 7 years into the plan, when a recruiter called with an offer that felt, for about a week, like the universe correcting a mistake you didn't know you'd made. A director title, a $40,000 raise, and a company car, a leased Audi, fully covered. For 1 week, some old version of you wanted to say yes immediately. Not because you needed the money, the account was already past $600,000 by then. Because some part of you, the part that grew up watching what a nice car did to how people were treated, wanted the Audi the way you'd wanted things at 22, before you'd done any of this math. Then you ran the numbers. The role meant 60-hour weeks, a bonus structure that had missed target twice in 3 years. And the free Audi wasn't free. It was a taxable perk that would have cost you about $6,200 a year in extra tax, quietly eating a sixth of the raise. 60 hours a week also meant less time to think clearly about the portfolio, less time for the daughter who was 7 at the time, and a stress level that, if you're honest, would have shown up eventually as a worse decision somewhere else. A bigger house, a second car, something. You turned it down. From the outside, it looked like settling. From the inside, the math said no. And for the first time in your life, you trusted the math over the ego completely, without a week of second guessing after. That single decision is arguably worth more of your $3.1 million than any stock pick you ever made. Sometimes the biggest financial decision of your life isn't what you buy. It's the offer you have the discipline to walk away from. Hold that thought, because your neighbor never got that call, and the difference shows up in his driveway. Derek isn't reckless. Derek makes $340,000 a year as a VP at a logistics company, more than double what you ever made in your best year. By every reasonable projection, Derek should be ahead of you. He isn't, and the reason isn't complicated. It's sitting in his driveway with a payment due on the 14th of every month. 15 years of payments, a BMW first, then a Porsche Cayenne, now the Tesla, comes to roughly $267,000 spent. Invested instead, that money would be worth $410,000 today. Derek doesn't have $410,000 anywhere. Derek has a driveway that photographs well. This isn't a story about Derek being foolish. He's good at his job. He's the guy who shows up with a ladder when your gutters need clearing. The car isn't a moral failing, it's a structural one. A decision made once, never revisited, absorbed into the budget the way water disappears into dry soil, the same way almost any recurring expense does for almost anyone if nobody ever stops to check it. At the barbecue last summer, someone asked what you drive. Old Corolla, still runs great, he said. You watch the small, automatic recalibration happen behind their eyes. The same recalibration you've watched a dozen times now in a dozen conversations, always slightly different and always exactly the same. The assumption isn't hostile, it's just automatic, that the man with the cracked bumper is doing fine ordinarily, and the man with a Tesla is doing better. Nobody's ever asked what either of you actually has saved, because that's not a question people ask. So the driveway does the talking, inaccurately, for both of you. Rule number 2. People don't see net worth. They see your last purchase and they build an entire story around it that's usually wrong. Here's the part that costs something real, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. There's a real cost to this. You've watched people extend an easy deference to Derek they don't extend to you. The longer conversation, the assumption his opinion carries more weight, even though you could buy his house in cash and barely feel it. It's small, it's rarely worth mentioning out loud, but it adds up across enough dinners and enough years that pretending it doesn't exist would be its own kind of dishonesty. You decided a long time ago that this tax, small, social, forgettable, is cheaper than the alternative. A car payment costing you $8,900 a year for a kind of visibility you never wanted. There's a second neighbor nobody at the barbecues talks about because he doesn't talk about himself. His name is Walter. He's 71. He drove the same Ford Ranger for 22 years before it gave out last spring and replaced it with another Ranger, used, cash. Walter worked for the county water department for 34 years, retired at 62, and has, by his own quiet admission over a fence one Saturday, more saved than he ever expected to need. Walter had talked to you plenty of times before that Saturday, about the weather, about a fence post that needed replacing, about nothing in particular. It was the first time either of you had said anything real about money, and it happened the way these conversations usually do. Sideways, almost by accident, while he was tightening a bolt and not looking at you. Walter isn't a cautionary tale, and he isn't an inspiration. He's simply further down the same road you're on. Watching him describe 40 years of decisions with the same flat tone he'd used to describe fixing a fence post, you understood something about your own $3.1 million you hadn't quite let yourself articulate before. The number was never the destination. It was evidence the direction had been correct for a long time. Walter told you something that morning that stayed with you longer than he probably intended. The hardest year isn't the first or the last. It's year 11 or 12, when the account's big enough to matter, but not big enough to feel real. That's where people quit, because the middle of compounding looks exactly like nothing happening. Write that down if you're taking notes, because it's the single most useful sentence in this video. You'll recognize the gap immediately. Year 11 for you was the year the account sat between $340,000 and $410,000 for what felt like an eternity. You checked it obsessively that year, almost daily, looking for proof that never showed up on schedule. Some weeks it went down, not up, and you'd feel for a day or two a low hummus doubt that never quite reached panic but didn't fully leave either. You stopped checking daily around year 13, not because you'd given up, but because you'd finally trusted the mechanism enough to stop needing to watch it work. There was no single dramatic moment in 19 years where the plan announced itself as working, no single milestone email, no conversation where someone confirmed you'd made the right call. Just a long, flat stretch of ordinary Tuesdays. And then, one Sunday afternoon, opening a spreadsheet out of habit, a number that had quietly become impossible to ignore. 3 years ago, your bank's private wealth division called you. Not the branch, an actual person who'd looked at your account before dialing. She knew the balance. She knew you hadn't touched the principal in over a decade. She offered you a rate that doesn't appear on any public sheet, reserved, she said, for a specific tier of client. She didn't know about the Corolla. If she'd passed you in the grocery store parking lot, she'd have had no reason to introduce herself at all. What she saw instead was a balance sheet, and the balance sheet doesn't care what you drive. Rule number 3. Banks don't price you on income. They price you on solvency, the gap between what you own and what you owe. A driveway full of leased cars isn't a status symbol to an underwriter. It's a warning light. Derek gets the rate posted on the website. Derek gets the automated refinancing email that goes out to everyone. You get the phone call from a person who did her homework first. The difference isn't what Derek earns. Derek earns more than you ever did. It's what happened to that income across 15 years of decisions about a driveway. You think sometimes about the version of yourself who didn't sell the Lexus that year, the one who kept the payment, kept the 6% savings rate, kept telling himself a future promotion would fix the math eventually. That version of you isn't a stranger. He's easy to imagine, still financing cars in his mid-50s, still 4 or 5 years from a retirement that keeps quietly receding. Now, here's the number that ties all of this together, the one that makes everything above worth sitting through. It's 7:52 on a Tuesday evening. You're at the kitchen table, the Corolla parked outside with 198,000 miles on it, and you open the account like you do most weeks, no ceremony. It grew $19,400 this month, not from anything you did today, from 19 years of decisions, compounding while you slept, while you sat in meetings, while you drove to work in a car nobody looked at twice. Derek's lease payment came out of his account 9 days ago. His Model X is charging quietly in a garage, and yours is sitting under a streetlight with a crack in the bumper. And neither of you thinks about either car very much anymore. The cars stopped being the point a long time ago, if they were ever the point at all. Your daughter asks over dinner that same evening why you don't just buy a nicer car now, that she's old enough to notice the gap between what her friend's parents drive and what sits in your driveway. Fair question. The nicer car doesn't change Tuesday. It doesn't change what the bank thinks of you. It doesn't change whether the roof gets fixed without a second thought when it needs fixing. It doesn't change the conversation you'll have with your manager the day you decide you don't need the job anymore. It only changes what strangers assume in a parking lot, and you stopped needing that a long time before she was born. She doesn't fully understand it yet, and you don't expect her to. Understanding it the way you understand it took 19 years of small, unglamorous Tuesdays, not a single dinner table explanation. What you can give her instead is the shape of it early, the difference between a payment and a purchase, between something bought to be looked at and something bought to be used, so that whenever her own version of that late-night reckoning arrives, it arrives a decade sooner than yours did. You think about what 20 more years of this looks like. At the current pace, another decade of the same contributions puts the account north of $6 million. Not a number you say out loud at a barbecue, a number that exists quietly, confirming the direction chosen at 34 was right, over and over for longer than most people are willing to wait for confirmation. One more comparison, and then we're done, because this one surprised even you. Last month, you had dinner with your old college roommate, Priya, now a partner at a law firm, making $410,000 a year, more than double what you or Derek ever made. She arrived in a car service. She doesn't own a car anymore. She talked for 20 minutes about a kitchen renovation that costs more than your entire Corolla twice over. You didn't mention your $3.1 million. You never do, but you ran the numbers anyway, quietly, the way you always do. Her savings, mentioned almost as an afterthought in the specific tone people use when they're slightly embarrassed by a number. $180,000, 12 years into a career that's paid her cumulatively north of $3 million. Sit with that gap for a second. $3 million earned, $180,000 kept. That's not a rounding error. That's a pattern. And it's the same pattern that shows up in every income bracket, just with more zeros attached the higher you go, which is the part nobody wants to hear at a dinner table where everyone's ordering the good bottle. This isn't Priya being careless. It's something more common and harder to see. She's living at the exact edge of what her income allows, and that edge rises every time her income does. The gap between what she earns and what she spends never widens, no matter how large the number in front of it gets. Rule number 4. Income solves problems money already has an answer for. It does not solve a lifestyle that grows exactly as fast as the income does. Priya doesn't have a money problem. She has a ceiling problem, invisible, moving upward every year so the distance between her and financial independence never actually closes. You, at $91,000 a year for most of your working life, crossed the finish line she's still running toward. Not because you were smarter, because at 34, you fixed the ceiling in place and let the income rise above it, instead of letting the ceiling rise with the income. That's the entire difference. It sounds small when you say it out loud. It is not small. It is the whole thing. You'll drive the Corolla until the cost of keeping it exceeds the cost of replacing it. Not before. Not because of a stranger's glance at a bumper. Not because Derek's driveway ever once made you reconsider yours. Not because a nicer car would fix anything that's actually broken in your life. Because nothing is. When that day comes, you'll buy another reliable used car with cash. park it under the same street light, and keep sending the same transfer on the second of the month. Because the transfer was never really about the car. It was about the version of the next 19 years you were willing to build. One ordinary, unremarkable, uncelebrated decision at a time. One last thing before the numbers. None of this required a six-figure salary, a lucky stock pick, or a head start most people don't get. It required one automated transfer, a car that didn't need replacing, and 19 years of not revisiting a decision you'd already made. That part is available to more people than the comment section usually admits, including probably you, watching this at whatever hour you're watching it with whatever number is currently sitting in your own account. If any part of this made you want to check your own numbers tonight, do it. Open the account you've been avoiding. Run 6% against your actual salary and see what year it puts you in. Write the number down. That's the uncomfortable part. It's also the only part that matters. And if you want the next one, because the next number is the one most people check the least, what they're actually worth on paper right now, today, subscribe. That's where we're going next. Nobody on this street knows what the driveway is actually hiding. That was never an accident. That was always the strategy.